In this video, we're going to show you how to plan and install a transom over a single or a double door. We'll show you how the width of the transom matches the doors below. We'll determine the height above the door that you will need for the transom, and then we'll talk about the size of the jamb. We've helped thousands of people do this, homeowners and contractors, so don't feel intimidated. All parts of this video are taken from the planning section of our website, where we have videos on many types of installations. At Transoms Direct, we build custom-sized windows to fit your opening. We can even help you design combinations of windows and doors to enclose larger openings like this one. So let's get started installing a transom directly over the top of a door. If your installation doesn't look like this one, then check out the planning section of our website. Chances are we already have a video series built for your exact situation. You have elected to install a transom window over an exterior door using a three-sided rough opening like you see here for installation. This type of opening may already exist along an exterior wall in your home. It may already have a door installed with a gap above, or you may be planning to build the entire opening from scratch. We'll cover each of these three scenarios in this video. Before we begin though, let's clear up a common misconception about placing a transom window above an exterior door. The transom unit that we design in this video will be placed into our rough opening and directly on top of the door unit, right on top, jamb to jamb. There's no need to add any extra framing members like 2x4s between the door and the transom. The header in the wall above is designed to carry the weight of the wall around both the transom and the door. But what if you've already built a separate opening above the door for the transom? Something like this. There's nothing particularly wrong with this, it's just a different style of installation. You could choose to reframe the opening and remove this piece, and then you can continue to follow the directions in this video. But if you prefer to just keep it this way, you can stop watching this video now and watch our other planning series on installing a transom window overhead in the wall. Now, let's relate this discussion back to the more traditional three-sided opening and your door unit, and the size of the transom that you should order. At Transoms Direct, our basic product is a transom sash that you order with specific dimensions, width, and height. This video focuses on width, and that's easy. Always order a transom sash that is the same width as the door you're going to place below. So if your contractor says you're going to have a 36-inch door going below, order a transom sash that is 36 inches as well. Your contractor should have the width of your door, or you can look up the specifications of the door. You can also measure your door width for yourself. On the interior side of the door, place a tape measure inside the door jamb and measure the clear inside width of the door, being careful not to include the door stop in your measurement. For double doors, measure across both doors, jamb to jamb. This double door has an inside width of 60 inches. You may have a double door with a divider and one door that's fixed in place, like you see here. You measure this the exact same way across both doors, jamb to jamb. Some doors even have a theatrical or an extra piece in the middle of the door with a locking mechanism. It's so important to measure doors like this in person. Some manufacturers shorten the length of one or both of the doors to account for the width of the theatrical, and some do not. For double doors, measuring the actual door is really the only way to know that you have the correct size. So when you're planning the width of your transom sash, set the sash width equal to the door below. As you can see, when we add jambs to both units, everything just lines up exactly and we're ready for install. But why do we need a jamb, you may ask? Well, obviously for a door, we all know that the jamb is what's attached to the wall and has hinges so that the door can swing open and close. But have you ever considered that the jamb is a kind of adapter that fits the thinner door sash into your thicker wall? That's right, it's an adapter, and it turns out that the transom sash will need an adapter, a jamb as well. Now that we know the width of the transom sash to order, let's discuss the width of the rough opening. If you're building a rough opening from scratch, make the opening 2 inches wider than the door size you plan to use. For the 36-inch door that we just saw earlier in this opening, we would make our rough opening 2 inches wider or 38 inches wide. That extra 2 inches will accommodate the jambs of the door and the transom unit above. So, when you're planning for a rough opening, build a rough opening that is 2 inches wider than the door you plan to use. Now that's really everything you need to know about width if you're building the opening from scratch or if you already have a door installed in your opening. But I know that there's some of you out there that have an existing opening in your wall that may be wider than the largest door that you think is practical. Say your opening is 52 inches wide. The largest practical door to use is a 36-inch door. If you do the math, that still leaves you about 14 inches to fill in for your 52-inch opening. If this is your situation, you can always frame in the opening to make it the correct size, but often that means significant rework on the siding or brick on the exterior of your home. Take a look at our video series on exterior side lights. We may be able to construct a custom side light solution that will exactly fit the opening you have without you having to reframe the opening. You are planning to set a transom over the top of a single door or a double door using a rough opening like this for installation. In the last video, you determined the width of the transom sash you needed to order. In this video, you'll determine the sash height. We'll discuss several scenarios in this video. First, if you've already built your rough opening and the door is already installed. Or maybe you've built your rough opening, but you're still waiting on your door. And finally, we'll help you size your rough opening if you need to build it from scratch. In our first scenario, if your door is already installed in your opening like this, let's determine the transom height that will fit in the opening you have. First, measure from the top of the door jamb to the top of your rough opening. For example, this clear opening above the door jamb is 14 inches tall. Here's where we apply the 2-inch rule. Always order a transom sash that is 2 inches shorter than the clear height above the door. Looking back at our example, with our 14 inches of clear height above the door, we can fit a transom sash that is 2 inches less or 12 inches tall. So everything works fine for a 12-inch transom, but what if you wanted to use a 16-inch transom instead? A 16-inch transom won't fit in this opening, but if you reframed it, how much space would you need? The 2-inch rule says to frame your opening 2 inches taller than the sash size you plan to order. So we need to go to 2 inches taller than the transom sash height we want to use, which is 16 inches. So with a 16-inch transom, we would need 18 inches of space. So why this extra room? Well, in the first video, we talked about how the transom sash will need a jamb, just like the door, to fit the thinner transom sash into your thicker wall. When you add a jamb to the sash, you now have a transom unit that is slightly larger in height and width than the dimensions of the sash size you ordered. Jambs are made of 1x material, and 1x material is exactly 3/4 of an inch thick. Since the jamb forms a perimeter all the way around the transom sash, the jamb adds an additional 3/4 of an inch along each edge of the transom sash, left, right, top, and bottom. Cumulatively, you end up with a transom unit for installation that is 1 1/2 inches wider and 1 1/2 inches taller than the sash size you order. Again, a transom sash enclosed in a jamb is called a transom unit. We consider such transom units with a jamb ready to install. Most customers do have us add a jamb to their transom sash before it leaves our factory. Our exterior jambs have a sloped sill at the bottom and are well sealed against water infiltration. We strongly suggest all customers include a jamb when they purchase an exterior transom from us. Looking back at our opening, With the transom unit now installed, you may notice that the extra 2 inches has left small gaps for shims on the sides and roughly a ½ inch at the top, which will be helpful during installation. So if you already have your door installed in the opening, you know exactly what to do. But what if your door hasn't arrived at the job site yet? With some simple measurements, we can mark where the top of the door jamb will sit in our opening when it arrives, and then we can determine the space available for the transom. So this arrow points to the top of the door jamb. If we go close up and highlight the door jamb, you can see it has a top and a bottom. Well, the industry standard is for this bottom edge of the jamb to be set 81 inches above the finished floor. And since the door's jamb is 3/4 of an inch thick, that means the top of the jamb will be set at 81 3/4 of an inch. So 81 3/4 is the standard distance from the top of the jamb to the finished floor below. If your finished floor is already installed, like you see here, just measure up into your opening that same 81 3/4 inch from the top of your finished floor. Everything above that mark is available for the transom. If you've not installed your finished floor and are looking at the plywood subfloor, you'll need to add the thickness of your flooring to this 81 3/4 inches to get your finished floor measurement. So let's say in this example, we were going to add real hardwood floors. You would first measure up from the subfloor 3/4 of an inch to account for the real hardwood, and then add that same 81 3/4 inches to mark a spot 82 1/2 inches off the subfloor. Once you have your measurement for the top of the door jamb, measure the clear opening above the top of the jamb and order the transom sash height 2 inches less than this opening. So now you know how to determine the width and the height of the transom sash you'll order. In the next video, you will determine the jamb depth that you need for your installation based on your wall thickness. After you've planned your rough opening and determined the width and height of your transom sash, it's time to size the depth of your window jamb. Since the jamb is a sort of adapter that fits the thinner transom sash into your thicker wall, the jamb must be sized to fit the exact building situation. Jambs only have one measurement that changes, the jamb depth. The jamb depth that you order should be equal to the thickness of the wall assembly where you plan to install the door and transom. There are 3 ways of determining the jamb depth for your transom. First is by copying the jamb depth you've already planned for your door. Second is by measuring your wall depth. And third is by adding up the thicknesses of the materials that make up the wall. Let's start with the easiest method, copying the jamb depth of your door. If you already physically have your door at the job site, measure the jamb's depth along the outside edge of the door. If your door has not yet been delivered, check the specifications and see what depth you ordered. Once you find the door's jamb depth, use the same jamb measurement for your transom. Next, let's talk about the second method of determining your jamb depth, measuring your wall thickness. To understand how to measure the thickness of your wall, let's go back in time a bit and see how this opening was originally constructed. If you were at the framing stage of this wall, you would see framing studs and the exterior wall sheathing behind the studs. This exterior wall sheathing is a type of plywood called OSB, and beyond that OSB lies the outside of the house. All houses have some form of exterior wall sheathing, just like this. Whether you have siding, brick, stone, or stucco, they're all on the other side of this wall sheathing you see here. This house it has siding, but that doesn't matter in terms of measuring the wall thickness to size your jamb, since all measurements are taken from the other side, the exterior side of this plywood sheathing, and they don't include exterior cladding like siding or brick. Now, if you're at the framing stage of construction, to get the correct thickness measurement, we need to consider that the insulation would be added inside the wall and then the drywall would be applied. This side angle of the opening shows the exterior plywood sheathing on the outside, our wall stud, and the drywall that we've applied on the inside. This sandwich of materials is what we call the wall assembly. So if you're at the framing stage of construction, you'll need to plan for the 1/2 inch drywall or other interior wall treatment when calculating the thickness of your wall assembly. Measure your wall thickness from the inside edge of the drywall to the exterior edge of the wall sheathing. But again, do not include any cladding like siding or brick in the measurement. In our case, we had a wall thickness of 4 9/16 inch, which is typical for a 2x4 exterior wall. Exterior wall thicknesses do differ by region of the country. In the north, 2x6 exterior walls are typical, measuring 6 9/16. Other areas of the country, like California, can have earthquake shear walls, so it's important to determine your wall thickness correctly. We can include any size jamb you need for your transom order. If you've not created your wall opening yet, ask your contractor to determine your wall thickness before an opening is framed. He'll probably look at the hinge side of an exterior door in your house to measure the edges of the flat jamb on each side of the doorstop, being careful not to include any casing in the measurement. This same exterior wall thickness will likely apply to the area where you're adding an opening as well. The door jamb I've shown here is on the first floor of this house, and it measured exactly 4 9/16 inches, which corresponds to the same 2x4 wall assembly measured in the opening that we showed you before. If you use this method, just be sure to measure an exterior door that goes directly outside. Avoid using a door to the garage or a basement door where the wall might have a greater thickness. To summarize, always order a jamb depth for your transom that is equal to the door's jamb depth. If the door is not available, you can measure the wall thickness in your opening, being careful to consider that the entire finished wall assembly is included in your measurement. If you've decided to calculate your wall thickness by adding the components in your wall assembly, also add 1/16 of an inch buffer to that final sum. A jamb that's slightly deeper than your finished wall assembly won't be noticeable after final installation. Thanks for watching.